Title: I ditched study group for some air on the balcony. She was already there. The library balcony was supposed to be empty that night. I just wanted 5 minutes away from spreadsheets and small talk. Instead, a stranger was leaning on the railing, watching the city. She turned around before I could disappear back inside. "You're hiding too," she said. Like she already knew me. 6 months later, I would lie to my own mother for her. 1 year later, I would almost lose her forever. My name is Maddie Carter, 24. A second-year MBA student at Fenwick University in Chicago. Raised in a small Ohio town where nobody asked questions like mine. I had spent my whole life folding myself smaller to fit inside other people's expectations. Until the night I met Jordan Ellis on that balcony changed everything. Our study group had rented a conference room on the 9th floor. The air thick with instant coffee and other people's anxiety about midterms. I told my group I needed water. Then took the stairwell up one more flight to the rooftop balcony nobody used after dark. Jordan didn't flinch when I nearly tripped over her bag. She just handed me the other half of her sandwich without asking. She was a third-year law student, she said. Pulling all-nighters for a moot court competition she pretended not to care about winning. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing important: bad campus coffee, our least favorite professors, the traffic on Lakeshore Drive. When my phone buzzed with 3 missed calls from my group, I realized I hadn't thought about spreadsheets once the entire time. "Same time tomorrow?" Jordan asked. Like it was already understood we'd both be back on that balcony again. I told myself it was just a nice conversation. The kind you have once and forget. I did not forget. The next night I found an excuse to leave study group 10 minutes early. And she was already there. 2 coffees in hand. We started meeting almost every night that week. Always the same spot. Always finding new things to argue about and laugh over. I noticed I was choosing my outfits more carefully on the nights I knew I'd see her. And I didn't want to examine why. Jordan mentioned once, casually, that she'd dated women before. I nodded like it was nothing, while something inside me quietly rearranged itself. By the second week, I was counting the hours until 9 p.m. and pretending to myself that this was only friendship. One rainy Thursday, Jordan showed up to our spot soaked through, having walked instead of waited for a bus, just to see me. I gave her my jacket without thinking, and something about the way she looked at me made my chest feel too small. She started leaving little notes tucked into library books she knew I'd check out. Ridiculous puns that made me laugh in silent reading rooms. I told her about growing up in Millfield, Ohio. Population 4,000. Where everyone still asked when I was bringing home a nice boy. Jordan told me about her father, a retired firefighter in Detroit, who once said he'd support her no matter who she loved. I envied that sentence more than I let on. My own father had never said anything close to it. Not once. We started grabbing real dinners instead of vending machine snacks, sitting across from each other at a diner near campus for hours. She had this habit of tapping her pen twice before making a point, and I found myself watching for it without meaning to. One night she asked why I always checked my phone before laughing too loud in public. I didn't have a good answer for her. I admitted, quietly, that I'd never told anyone in my family I liked women. Jordan just nodded and let the silence hold me. "You don't owe anyone an announcement," she said. "You just owe yourself the truth. Whenever you're ready to hear it." That sentence followed me home that night. Replayed itself while I stared at the ceiling instead of sleeping. We started walking each other partway home, extending routes that should have taken 10 minutes into 40-minute loops around the block. My roommate Priya teased me about the new study buddy I mentioned constantly, and I laughed it off. Cheeks burning. Jordan invited me to her moot court final. I sat in the back row, more nervous for her than I'd ever been for my own exams. She won. When she found me in the hallway after, she hugged me a beat too long, and neither of us pulled away first. That hug stayed with me for days, a warmth I kept returning to in my mind during boring lectures and long commutes. I started noticing things, The way she chewed the cap of her pen, the specific song she hummed when she thought no one heard. On my birthday, she showed up with a single cupcake and a candle, saying she didn't believe in overplanning feelings that were already obvious. What feelings? Asked, half joking. She just smiled and said, "You'll figure it out. You're smarter than you're pretending to be." We spent an entire Saturday at the Art Institute, and I realized I hadn't checked my phone once, hadn't performed for anyone. Walking back, our hands brushed twice. The second time, neither of us moved away, and I let my fingers stay close to hers. I called my best friend from home, Rachel, and told her I'd met someone. I didn't say a name or a pronoun. Not yet. Rachel asked, gently, if this someone made me happy. I said yes before I even fully understood what I was admitting. Jordan started showing up outside my classes with coffee. No explanation needed. Just handing it over and falling into step beside me. I began comparing every future decision, apartments, cities, careers, against one quiet question. Would this take me further from her? One evening on the balcony, she reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, her hand lingering just a second too long. "I like you, Maddie," she said plainly. "No games. No hedging. I've liked you since the sandwich. Just so you know." I didn't answer with words. I leaned in and kissed her, the city lights blurring behind us, my hands shaking against her jacket. When we pulled back, she laughed softly and said, "Took you long enough." I laughed too, dizzy with relief and fear at once. We didn't put a label on it right away. We just started holding hands on our nighttime walks, quietly, like a secret worth keeping. I told her about my parents' plans for me, the right kind of future they imagined, involving a husband and a house near home. Jordan listened without judgment, just asked what I wanted, not what anyone else expected me to want. Nobody had asked me that before. For the first time, I answered honestly, even if only to myself. I wanted this. I wanted her. However complicated that made things. We started calling ourselves together in private, though I still flinched slightly whenever anyone at school asked if I was seeing someone. Jordan never pushed me to say more than I was ready to. She just kept showing up, patient in a way I didn't deserve yet. My mother called for our weekly check-in, asking if I'd met anyone nice. I said I was focused on school, and hated myself a little for it. Jordan met my roommate Priya properly over dinner, and Priya texted me afterward. "She's wonderful. Also, you're obviously in love. Just so you know." I laughed off the word love, but that night, lying awake, I let myself admit it might already be true. We spent winter break mostly apart. She flew to Detroit. I went home to Ohio, and I missed her more than I expected to. My father asked, a Christmas dinner, if I was still single. I said yes. Jordan texted me that same night, "I miss your face." I stared at that message for a long time before writing back, "I miss yours more," and meaning every word of it. When we returned to campus in January, she picked me up from the airport with a handwritten sign that just said, "Welcome home." I cried a little in the car, and she didn't ask why. Just held my hand at every red light the whole way back. We started spending weekends together properly. Her tiny apartment, my dorm. Movie nights that ended in long conversations about our futures. She told me she'd applied for a public defender position in Chicago after graduation, hoping, though she never said it outright, that I'd stay too. I found myself researching Chicago-based MBA internships instead of ones back home, rearranging my whole plan around a person I'd known 5 months. Priya noticed the shift in me, softer, more sure of myself, and said I seemed less like I was apologizing for existing. Jordan met my old friend Rachel over video call, charming her instantly, and afterward Rachel texted, "Okay, I get it now. She's great." For a few months, life felt almost simple: classes, late-night talks, Quiet Sunday mornings that stretched longer than they should have. I hadn't told my parents anything. I told myself there was time, that I'd choose the right moment when it finally arrived. Jordan never pressured me, but I sometimes caught her watching me with a flicker of worry she tried to hide behind a smile. I didn't know yet that the moment would choose itself, and it would arrive far sooner, and far harder, than I was ready for. Spring break arrived, and my mother had a surprise waiting, dinner with Derek Hensley, a family friend's son she'd been not so subtly promoting for months. I sat through that dinner smiling politely, thinking of Jordan the entire time, guilty for how easy it would be to just say yes to this life. Derek was kind enough, ambitious, exactly the kind of man my parents had always pictured beside me at Sunday dinners for the rest of my life. Driving home, my mother said, "He's perfect for you, Madison. Don't overthink this one." I didn't answer. I just stared out the window. That night I called Jordan, needing to hear her voice, needing something real after an evening spent performing a version of myself I didn't recognize. "I hate lying to them," I admitted. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I know. But it has to be your choice. On your timeline." Back in Chicago, things felt urgent in a new way, like a clock had started ticking somewhere I couldn't quite see or stop. We started being more careful in public near campus, worried about who might recognize us, who might know someone who knew my family back home. I hated the careful distance we kept in daylight, hands not quite touching. Our closeness folded away until we were somewhere private again. Jordan noticed the shift too. "I'm not ashamed of you," she said one night. "I just need to know you're not ashamed of this either." I promised her I wasn't, even as some small, frightened part of me wondered how much of that promise I actually believed. Then, on a weekend visit home for my grandmother's birthday, disaster arrived in the most ordinary way through Mrs. Whitfield, our old church neighbor. Mrs. Whitfield had been visiting her niece in Chicago and swore she saw me on Michigan Avenue, holding hands with some girl, bold as anything. She mentioned it to my mother at the birthday party, cheerfully, thinking it was harmless small talk. Not knowing what she was setting in motion, my mother pulled me into the kitchen afterward, her voice low and tight. "Is there something you need to tell me, Madison?" I froze, dish towel in hand. Every rehearsed explanation I'd never actually rehearsed evaporating from my mind all at once. "It's not what you think," I said, which was, exactly the wrong thing to say, and both of us knew it. My father appeared in the doorway then, arms crossed, and said quietly, "I think we all know what it is. We're just waiting for her to say it." That sentence cracked something open in me, not just fear, but a strange, sharp relief that the secret was finally splitting apart on its own. "Her name is Jordan," I said, my voice shaking. "She's in law school. I love her." I had never said those words out loud before. My mother sat down hard at the kitchen table, pressing her palm flat against it like she needed something solid to hold on to. My father said nothing for a long moment, then simply walked out to the garage, the way he always did when he needed to think. My grandmother, watching from the doorway with her cane, said only, "Well, that explains the smile you've had for months." She didn't sound angry. I clung to that small mercy on the drive back to Chicago, even as my mother's silence on the phone that week said everything her words didn't. Jordan met me at the train station, and I fell apart the second I saw her. Months of careful control collapsing all at once. "They know," I said into her shoulder. "I don't know what happens now." She held me tighter and said, "We figure it out together." For 2 weeks, my mother didn't call. The silence was louder than any argument we could have had, and it terrified me more. I threw myself into internship applications instead, using the ache in my chest as fuel to prove I could build a life without their approval. Jordan's own family complicated things too. Her mother, older and more traditional than her father, worried openly about how hard this life would be for her. "She's not against us," Jordan explained. "She's just scared for me. That's different. Even if it doesn't always feel that way." I started to understand that fear could look like rejection sometimes, even when love was still buried somewhere underneath it, unspoken. Then Derek called me, awkwardly, saying my mother had mentioned some confusion, and he just wanted to check in. As a friend, I told him the truth, plainly. And he went quiet before saying, "Okay. Thanks for telling me straight. That took guts." Maddie. His decency surprised me. A small unexpected kindness in a season that otherwise felt like it was collapsing around every corner. My internship search hit a wall too. A firm I'd been counting on rescinded their offer, citing budget cuts that felt suspiciously sudden. I later learned, through a mutual contact, that a partner at the firm golfed regularly with my father. I never got proof it was connected. Jordan wanted to fight it, file a complaint, make noise. I asked her to let it go. I didn't have the strength for one more battle. "You're allowed to be angry," she said. "You don't have to be calm about everything just because everyone else demands it of you." I broke down that night. Finally. Months of composure giving way to something rawer. And Jordan just held space for it without trying to fix anything. My mother finally called. 3 weeks later. Her voice careful and clipped. "Your father and I need time. This isn't easy for us." "It isn't easy for me either," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice came out, even as my hand shook around the phone. She asked if this Jordan person made me happy. I said yes, without hesitation, for the first time answering a question about myself honestly. The call ended without resolution. But something had shifted. A door left slightly open instead of slammed shut completely. And I clung to that. Jordan graduated that spring, accepting the public defender position in Chicago, choosing to stay for a city, and for a girl, over a bigger paycheck elsewhere. I landed a smaller internship instead, less prestigious but honest, at a nonprofit downtown, and found I didn't mind the trade nearly as much as expected. We moved into a small apartment together that summer, our first real home. Boxes everywhere, mismatched furniture, and more happiness than I'd ever known. My grandmother started calling me every Sunday, casually asking about how Jordan's doing, never making it a big announcement, just quietly, steadily including her. My father remained distant, polite at best during rare calls, and I learned to accept his silence without letting it define my worth. Just when life started to feel stable, an old rival from my program, Ashley Byrne, resurfaced in a way I never saw coming. Ashley had always resented losing a coveted internship spot to me sophomore year, and she'd apparently never quite let it go. She found out about Jordan and me through a mutual acquaintance, and something about that information seemed to interest her far too much. I didn't think much of it then. I had no idea Ashley was about to become the reason everything nearly fell apart completely. Ashley worked at Pierce & Callaway, the same firm now recruiting for a highly competitive analyst position I'd been quietly hoping to land. At a networking mixer, Ashley cornered me by the bar, smiling too sweetly, and said, "I heard some interesting things about your roommate situation." My stomach dropped. I asked what she meant, though I already knew exactly what she meant, and exactly how dangerous that knowledge was. "Pierce is old school," she said, referring to the senior partner. "Wouldn't want anything getting in the way of your interview, would we?" I left the mixer early, hands trembling, replaying her words over and over on the train ride home, unable to shake the threat underneath them. Jordan noticed something was wrong the moment I walked in, and I finally told her everything, my voice cracking halfway through the story. "That's blackmail," Jordan said, furious in a way I'd rarely seen. "You report that. You don't shrink yourself for people like her. And lose the position anyway. Just publicly this time." I snapped back, exhausted, scared, and unfairly taking it out on the one person on my side. We had our first real fight that night. Voices raised. Old fears about visibility and safety colliding with different instincts about how to fight back. Jordan slept on the couch. I lay awake in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was already losing everything at once. The next morning, we apologized separately, quietly. But something tender between us had bruised. A small crack neither of us mentioned again for weeks. I decided not to report Ashley. Not yet. Choosing instead to simply prepare harder, hoping talent alone could outweigh whatever rumors might spread. 2 days later, my grandmother had a stroke. My mother called sobbing, saying I needed to come home immediately, that things looked serious. I packed a bag in 10 minutes, Jordan driving me straight to the airport, holding my hand tightly the entire way there. At the hospital, my mother and I sat in matching plastic chairs, saying almost nothing, united only by fear for the same fragile woman. My grandmother woke up 2 days later, weak but lucid. And the first thing she asked was whether Jordan had come with me. She wanted to, I said. But I told her to stay in Chicago. My grandmother frowned. That was a mistake. Family should be here. Her words startled me, the casual, certain way she'd already folded Jordan into the definition of family, without asking anyone's permission. My mother, overhearing, said nothing. But I saw something flicker across her face, something between surprise and quiet reconsideration. During that week home, my mother and I talked more honestly than we had in years, fear for my grandmother softening old defenses. I don't fully understand this, she admitted one night, but I don't want to lose you over something I don't understand. Help me understand. It wasn't a full acceptance, but it was a door, wider than the one that had opened months earlier, and I walked through it carefully. I called Jordan every night from the hospital hallway, missing her fiercely, grateful even for the distance that let me handle my family my own way. When I returned to Chicago, exhausted and raw, I found Jordan had cleaned the apartment, made my favorite soup, and left a note, "Welcome home. Rest." That small gesture undid something in me, all the accumulated fear finally breaking loose into tears I'd been holding back for days. We talked properly that night about the fight, about Ashley, about how fear had made us both sharper with each other than we meant to be. "I need you to fight for us out loud sometimes," Jordan said gently. "Not perform for anyone. Just not disappear either. When it matters. Promise to try." And meant it. Though I still didn't know exactly what trying would look like when the moment actually arrived. The interview at Pierce & Calloway came a week later. I walked in prepared, professional, refusing to let fear script my answers for me. Ashley was there too, watching from across the lobby, a small smile on her face that I chose not to let rattle me. The interview went well, better than expected. The panel impressed by my nonprofit work and a case study I'd built around community lending programs. Afterward, one of the junior partners, a woman named Denise Okafor, pulled me aside and said quietly, "Ignore whatever noise you might be hearing. Just do your work." I didn't know exactly what she meant, but something in her tone told me Ashley's whispers hadn't traveled as far, or landed as heavily, as I'd feared. A week of anxious waiting followed, filled with imagined scenarios where every possible outcome ended in some form of losing everything I'd worked toward. Then Jordan surprised me with tickets to a Cubs game, insisting we needed one evening where neither of us thought about firms or families at all. Sitting in the stands, sunlight on her face, I felt something settle in my chest that had been clenched tight for months. "Whatever happens with the job," she said, "we're still going to be okay. I need you to actually believe that. Not just say it." I told her I did believe it, and for the first time in a long while, I realized I actually meant every word. The offer came the following Monday. I got the position. Ashley, notably, did not receive the same call from Pearson Calloway. I later learned, through Denise, that Ashley had a pattern of complaints from colleagues about undermining coworkers, and it had finally caught up with her. Karma. That's what it was. Felt less satisfying than I expected. Mostly I just felt relieved the threat had lost its power. With the job secured, Jordan and I finally felt steady enough to plan further ahead. A real apartment lease, a future that felt possible. My mother asked, hesitantly, if she and my father could visit Chicago that fall, to see how we were doing. I said yes immediately. The visit was scheduled for October, around the same weekend as a charity gala Jordan's public defender office was hosting downtown. I panicked slightly, imagining my still uncertain father in a room full of Jordan's proudly out colleagues, imagining every possible way it could go wrong. Considered, briefly, asking Jordan to skip the gala that weekend, just to avoid the collision of two worlds I wasn't ready to merge. When I brought it up, hesitant and rehearsed, Jordan's face changed in a way that told me instantly I'd said the wrong thing. You want me to hide, she said quietly. The one night your parents are actually here to see our life. That's what you're asking. I tried to explain it wasn't like that. But even as I spoke, I heard how much it sounded exactly like that. I have spent 5 years being visible on purpose, Jordan said, so that people after me wouldn't have to fight as hard. I won't shrink now. We didn't fight loudly this time. It was worse, a quiet, cold distance that settled over the apartment for the rest of that week. I didn't know if we'd recover from this one. For the first time since the balcony, I genuinely wondered if I might lose her. I spent 2 sleepless nights turning Jordan's words over, realizing she was right, that I'd been asking her to fold herself smaller again. I called my mother and told her plainly, we were all going to the gala together, Jordan included. Exactly as she was. No editing. My mother was quiet for a moment, then said, okay, your father and I will be there. We'll figure out the rest as it comes. I showed up at Jordan's office that afternoon, nervous, holding 2 coffees like the very first night we'd properly talked on the balcony. I was wrong, I said. I don't want you hidden. Not that night. Not ever again. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it clearly. Jordan studied me for a long moment before finally taking the coffee from my hand. Okay, she said softly. Let's go to that gala. Then. The night of the gala arrived faster than I was ready for. My parents' rental car pulling up outside our apartment right on time. My father, stiff in a suit, shook Jordan's hand and said, nice to properly meet you. His voice careful but not unkind. A small start. At the gala, I introduced Jordan to my parents' table without hesitation, without softening the language, simply saying, this is Jordan, my partner. My mother's hand found mine under the table at one point, squeezing gently, a silent gesture that meant more than any speech could have. Midway through dinner, my grandmother, who had insisted on flying in despite her recent stroke, tapped her glass and stood, unsteady but determined. I have something to say, she announced, and the whole table, including strangers nearby, quieted to listen to the elderly woman with the cane. My sister Eleanor loved a woman named Frances. Back in 1961, she said. She never got to say so out loud. Not once. Her whole life. The table went silent. My mother's face went pale, clearly hearing this family history for the very first time. Same as the rest of us. I watched my sister disappear a little more every year, hiding something beautiful, my grandmother continued, and I swore I'd never let that happen again. She looked directly at me, then at Jordan, her voice steady despite everything her body had been through in recent months. Not in this family. I felt tears sting my eyes, understanding suddenly where my grandmother's quiet, unwavering acceptance had come from all along. A grief carried for decades. My father set down his fork, jaw tight, clearly moved in a way he wasn't accustomed to showing in public, or maybe anywhere at all. After dinner, he found me near the coat check, alone for a moment, and said, "I didn't know about Eleanor. I'm sorry, Madison, for a lot of things." It wasn't a perfect speech, but it was more than I'd ever expected from him, and I let myself accept it exactly as it was. He turned to Jordan then, extending his hand again, more firmly this time. "Take care of my daughter," he said. "She's stubborn. You'll need patience." Jordan laughed, surprised, and shook his hand properly. "I've noticed," she said. "I'm working on my patience every single day, sir." Something in the room shifted after that. Not a fairy tale transformation, but a real, human loosening of years of unspoken fear. Later that night, Jordan and I walked home slowly, coats pulled tight against the October wind, neither of us saying much, both of us relieved. "Your grandmother," Jordan finally said, "just changed both our family's history in one dinner. I don't think I'll ever forget tonight." I told her about Eleanor, about the aunt I'd never known existed, a whole hidden chapter of my family suddenly rewritten in front of me. "She waited her whole life for someone to say it was allowed," I said. "I don't want to wait that long for anything. Not anymore." Jordan stopped walking, turned to face me under a streetlight, and said, "Then don't. Say what you want. Right now." "I'm listening." I took a breath, the city quiet around us, and said the truest thing I knew. "I want a life with you. All of it. In the open." She smiled, the same smile from that very first night on the balcony, and said, "Good. Because I've wanted that since the sandwich. Remember?" We laughed, some of the old lightness returning between us, the tension of the past weeks finally easing from both our shoulders. A month later, my grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep, having lived just long enough to see her family finally understand her sister's story. At the funeral, my father asked if he could say a few words. He spoke about Eleanor by name for the first time in 50 years. He then looked at me and Jordan, sitting together in the second row, and added, "My daughter won't have to hide anything. Not while I'm here." I held Jordan's hand tightly through the rest of the service, grief and gratitude tangled together in a way I hadn't expected to feel at once. That winter, Jordan proposed on the same rooftop balcony where we'd first met, nervous in a way I'd never seen her before. "I know it's not fancy," she said, kneeling awkwardly by the same railing, "but it felt like the only place that made sense to ask you." I said yes before she even finished the question, laughing and crying at the same time, the city lights blurring exactly like that first kiss. We were married the following spring, my father walking me partway down the aisle before Jordan's father walked the rest with her to meet me. My grandmother's photo sat on the front table beside the guest book, a quiet reminder of the woman who made our happiness possible. I used to think love had to be quiet to be safe, folded away like a secret nobody could take from me. Now I know real safety was never in the hiding, it was in Jordan's hand and mine. In the open. For good. Andy.